In the language that they speak. I'm looking for horses.
It's basic marketing. If you say someone get a horse domain, they want to end up at a page that looks like they're going to get a horse domain, not a something else.
Domain.
Basketball, hockey, whatever. So that's one thing. There are others that are much more general purpose. Like we have .work. I mean, everyone works, or many people do. People are looking for jobs, companies are looking for employees. That's a really big audience. That's not a niche at all. In those cases, those big registrars with all of their customers are the natural channel for us. So we plan to work with all the registrars, but to have our own registrar as well.
So Minds+Machines then has the authoritative database, the authoritative registry for these names, as well as you are a registrar selling these names to the niche audiences, as well as working within the ecosystem of the rest of the registrars that already exist and sell names.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be interesting. We think that this whole existing ecosystem will change quite a bit. We don't know exactly how. But it's important to realize that the entry of Google and Amazon into this world is going to change everything.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what they've done to enter this world? Because traditionally, there's been no Google, there's been no Amazon, there's been a VeriSign, there's been a Minds+Machines, and now these new huge players in the internet have gotten into the domain name game. What does that look like? If
I look at the ecosystem, I can't speak for Google or what they plan, but it may well be that they are building a registrar as well, like we did. Only, of course, their reach is not paralleled by anyone.
How many names did Google apply for?
Just about 100.
Okay. So they invested in this program significantly.
Yeah, so what they do is they sell, for instance, apps for business. And it's not free. I mean, if Gmail's free for you personally, but if you want apps for business, there's a per person charge per month. So they love this idea. If I were them, I would love this idea of being able to address those people directly, because the big problem with the domain name today is that it's very hard to go from the name to a website or to do anything with it. You know, if you register a domain and you click settings, suddenly you're looking at CNAMEs and IP addresses, and if you see something that says put in your IP address and your name servers, the average person understands
what is that?
They understand put in and nothing else, right? So I think a lot of people are looking at this problem because it's very important for their business to get people on using the internet. So we look at Google as a potentially the next big registrar, and we know that they want to promote these new TLDs because that helps promote their business. We expect to be working with them on that.
Now they applied for names that we would expect them to apply for because they are part of their business already. .mail, .apps, .music, .search,
.cloud. And other people did too. So Amazon is the other big disruptor here because they do hosting. I mean, they have all these cloud hosting services. Now today there are a lot of hosting companies, right? But they're under a lot of pressure from these cloud services. And I have to believe that Amazon's going to do very well in that area. And they too applied for a lot of names. So it really validated the space for us. I think it's going to introduce new channels for us, and it makes me very, very bullish on the new top-level domains in general.
Now you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you don't believe the brands are necessarily going to use their names, but if you look at the brands that applied, 50% of the world's top 100 brands applied for their top-level domains. So most of the brands that we would hear of, .starbucks, .gap, they're all in there. So if the way that we use the internet now is going to change so significantly with search, with the way I call what I call myself in my blog and my email, do you not think that the brands will also see this as a strategic way to name themselves online and will start to
They will, 10 years late.
them?
I mean, that's usually how it works. I mean, these guys are not first movers. They're not.
You heard it here first.
They're not in the value creation business. They're in the value preservation business. So they're going to wait till it's nice and safe. It's like no one wants to be first and no one wants to be second. So it's sort of like jockeying positioning game. And you mentioned 50% of the top 100 applied. Well, the other 50% didn't. And that's an interesting thing for our business as well, is if we look at Google and Amazon applying, you have to look at who didn't apply. Apple didn't apply for anything except .apple. Yahoo didn't apply for anything except .yahoo and .flickr. So because that application period is closed, those people, if they twig to the idea of what's going on with Yahoo and, with Google and Amazon, they're going to have to find a way to get into that. Now they can wait until the second round, which could be quite a while, or they can talk to people who already have applied for those names. So we think that's going to be an interesting dynamic as we get toward the end of this whole program.
The shift in ownership of who runs what name, who uses what name for what, that it will shift around to
Well, I think
different
that
players.
people like ourselves or Uniregistry or domain venture partners,
the large portfolio
yeah,
applicants
there's really
who apply
just
for
about
many
there's
names.
like 6 or 7 people who are going to end up controlling most of these names. We expect them to start getting calls from the people who didn't apply because that's their only way into these things. So that we'll see if that's true, but I think that will happen.
How do you see these names being used on the internet?
Well, I think it's very simple. People are going to have a clue what's behind the name by looking at the name. So if you see a .com name today, you don't know if it's a bank or a malware site. .com doesn't really tell you very much about what's behind that name.
You have to click onto the site to actually know what the content will be.
Which can be dangerous, right? So in a .horse, you're pretty sure it's going to be about horses. .rodeo, it's going to be about rodeo. And we think that will have an effect on the search results. So Google is saying, well, we're not going to give any special treatment to new top-level domains. That's true, but it's also true that they try and deliver relevant results to people. So if people searching for a hotel, so if you type of Hotel New York in your browser in Google, you're going to find pages and pages of booking sites, and actually not anything to do with hotels in New York. We think that when people start seeing .hotel at the end of something, they're going to click that more than they would the .com because they know it's about hotel. And if more people click on it, that's going to tell Google that's more relevant to its users, and that's going to push these things up. So I think that's going to be very true with these niche domains. I think if people start searching about something with horses, .horse domains are going to filter up because they're authoritative about that. Just as today, a .edu or a .gov domain name tends to rank higher than a .com because it's seen as more authoritative. So I think there's a very virtuous feedback cycle in search with these new TLDs.
That's a big question that's being asked around this. How will this change search? And I think the fact that most common search terms have been applied for and a large majority of geographic areas have been applied for. So in the 1900s, a large base of the words that are used most commonly on the internet have been applied for. So even if Google, as you said, is not suggesting that this will change search, I think that perhaps that...
Well, it'll change naturally just by people's usage. I think that's the answer. There's a lot of names still to be applied for. I think the best ones are in this round. In fact, today I think there are 2 or 3 names that I didn't apply for that nobody else applied for that I think, oh, I should have applied for that. That's not very many. Because once you start getting past 100 names, you're going from things like music and blog and obvious things to really kind of specialized stuff, like camping. It's not bad, but it's not fantastic. So what's left, right? Well, there's a lot of American cities, for one thing. Most of the European capitals applied, but lots of American cities didn't. We just have New York, Miami, Boston, and Las Vegas. So that's certainly one thing that's going to happen. But right now, I would say that the people who are in this round, they're the winners because the good names are gone at this point.
Do you think that people will understand in the near term when these names are launched, will understand how to use them? So for example, that I can buy Jennie-Marie.Vegas because Vegas is fun to me, and I can have an email address that says mail@jenniemarie.vegas, and that won't cost me very much, and I could set that up in 5 minutes. Do you think that understanding will come through quickly enough to validate this name's, the introduction of the new names?
I think people are not stupid, but they're not necessarily very diligent either. So you might be able to set that up in 5 minutes. Most people can't. It's hard for most people to set up email. So that's what I was saying before.
Might take me 10.
You need somebody to help you. So Google is great at that. You know, it's easy to get a Gmail address. That's one of the reasons it's really popular. And it doesn't have anything to do with a domain name. So it's just at gmail.com, right? So I think the usage is going to come from forward-looking people helping end users use them properly. But people aren't stupid. I mean, it's not that hard, frankly, your name at somewhere. I mean, people move all the time, and they manage to fill out their address change cards.
But people have habits, right? For example, in the US, using a Gmail account is very common, very popular, a Hotmail account or a Yahoo account for a personal mail address.
Yeah.
And often small businesses they'll register mysmallbusiness.com, and they'll still use jenniemarie@yahoo.com as their business email. Whereas in, for example, Germany, where they're very, very used to CCTLDs, they understand that I can buy a domain name .de and then I can use it as my email address as well. So there are sort of habits that exist. Do you think that the new names are going to help shift those habits?
It's not clear to me that those habits are anything other than I don't understand how to use my domain name.
But will these new names help to shift that, because the new players will?
I think they will. Not the names in themselves, right? The names in themselves are an insignia. That's what you broadcast to the people you want to hear. And you may have many, as I said. As you have different personalities. What's going to change people's behavior to get them to consume domain names and connect them to their email or their website are tools that make it easy for people to connect them to their email or their website. Those don't exist today. It's a nightmare for most people to use a domain name. And I think it's not the names themselves, it's the entry of these new players who are going to do something about that problem that's really going to help.
Existing players like Google, who have already helped
they know how to do
users
it, right?
to start using the internet, to start using email.
Yeah, you look at Amazon and e-commerce, you know. We've been building a website builder that we like a lot for that reason. So we really want to get people from the name to using the name. That's the big challenge.
This is something else that a lot of people are asking is what's going to be different about the new names? Can we use them differently? What's going to change the way we use websites? So you just mentioned that you like this new website builder that you guys have been developing. Do you think that the new names will, in many cases, be offered as packages with new services that make it easier to use?
Yeah, I mean, they are today, but they're offered with services that aren't easy to use. So if you go to your typical place, they're like, you know, get a name and get a hosting account.
What's that?
What's that? How do I use that? Oh, it's easy. There's this thing called cPanel.
Of course.
With all of these like server-side, Linux-based apps that no one knows how to use. So it's not a helpful ecosystem at this time, but I see a lot of that changing.
I love the example that you always use .horse, because it is the perfect niche. You know, not everybody has or cares about horses. Do you think that perhaps a .horse site might be offered with an email, a website where I can upload a picture of the horse that I'm going to sell and a video? Do you think that type of package might be offered?
Absolutely. That's exactly the idea. I mean, I think people have uses beyond that, but that's your basic idea, right? You've got a horse. Do you love your horse? You want everyone to see your horse? How do you do that? That's what the web is for.
How do you see cities using this? You mentioned 4 U.S. cities, and there's many, many international cities.
Yeah, so we're working with a number of them, and it's interesting. They have a lot of different public policy things that they want to use it for. Part of it is it's obviously great for small businesses. So if you're a plumber in Miami, you probably want plumber.miami, not plumber.com, because otherwise you'll get calls from people in Dallas and Cleveland, and you really don't want to drive that far. So it's great for small businesses, particularly brick and mortar type businesses that are geographically defined. But there's also delivery of government services. That's important. So cities are looking at how they will, rename how people can find their services on the internet. So e-government's pretty important. I think that a lot of cities have a real interest in policing these domain names too. And that's another area where these are very different in that today there aren't really a lot of rules around .com, which is great in one way, but it's, it means that anyone can get a name. Well, anyone will get a name, and some of those anyones will be bad people.
And you might not be looking for that anyone.
Right, so I think that you're going to see cities set up rules around acceptable use and who can get a name. And there's a lot of different approaches being tried.
Which might be, I live in that city, or I do business with that city.
Yeah, or you can't use these sorts of names. We don't approve of that. Now, there's really tricky questions of law and free speech and a lot of other stuff. But I think what you will see, and not just in cities, but in general, are registry operators policing their spaces and doing things to get rid of malefactors of various kinds.
What do you think policing means to the average user? So if I buy a .Vegas name and I put up a website that has my Vegas nail salon, what can I expect from a registry to police my site?
Well, they wouldn't police your site. Your site sounds completely innocent. It's the people who say, hey, come to Vegas, here's a coupon for some chips at a casino, and you click it and suddenly you've got some malware installed on your computer. I think that's more what I mean by policing. So they're going to respond to complaints about this stuff in a much more active way than we've seen heretofore.
I think there might be some fears associated from internet users with what the new names are and who's behind them and why are they arriving. I think this is an important element to talk about, actually, is that there are many mechanisms like monitoring, like policing the space, like protecting against malware, spyware, that are being put in place by the registry, so that these things have been taken into account.
I don't think there are any fears by internet users because internet users don't know about this stuff yet. There are fears by insiders. And it's one of those things where you can always think of a risk and then you just can't quantify it, so it's big, right? So we'll see about that. I think what's going to happen is instead internet users are going to appreciate that down the line when they start becoming aware of the TLDs, the new TLDs, and they start to see problems. Then they're going to be appreciative of the fact that there are mechanisms to deal with these things, and they're going to gravitate to those people who do it well as opposed to those who don't.
So I think we've talked a lot about the names that will affect the Western culture, the English-speaking, the Latin character using Europe, North America. There are equal amount of names that have been applied for in characters that are not Latin, Arab characters, the international domain names, the IDNs. How do you think that the new names are going to change the way non-Western cultures use the internet?
Well, I think it's really a question of dealing with pent-up demand. I think it's a policy goal of a lot of people who work on the internet that there is one internet. And because many people were not able to communicate in their native languages and their native character sets, there was always a fear that they might go off and start their own one. So I really think that's what that's about. We'll see how effective those are. I think if you think that there's a problem with adoption of new top-level domains because people don't know about them, I think that is magnified with the internationalized domain names because those who are on the internet are used to using Latin character names. And so there's questions of how do you input this stuff, whether it's supported by software, and so on. So I think they're going to take a little longer.
It's a matter of changing habit, changing the way that these people use the internet currently, and they've been forced to handle Latin characters, which are not their native characters. So do you think that they will make that shift over to their own characters, or are they just used to using...
I've had Russian-speaking employees who write things to each other in transliterated Russian, so they'll use Latin characters to spell out the words. That's become common. So we'll see. I think they'll be popular, but not immediately.
Because the whole world doesn't yet use the internet. Just a small population of the entire world's population is currently using the internet, And so as new generations come online, these names are actually set up to serve those generations.
Yeah, I mean, well, most people don't use names. I mean, they just use their mobile phone or whatever. So I think really these new top-level domains, yeah, they're personal uses, and some people have websites, but it's really about business. That's really who's going to use this. They're the people that have to have a website. They're the people that need to communicate what they're doing to their customers. It's completely optional for you to have a website. Not you as a business, you as a person. So until the tools are there for people to make that easy for people, probably it's going to be not as popular for personal use as it is for business.
Antony, thank you so much for your time. These are going to be exciting times.
Jennie-Marie, thank you so much for having me.